Brethren, dear Templars, remember, after reading the caption of the broadcast, the ideal thing is for you to read the description of the broadcast so that you familiarize yourself with other important topics that we are going to be addressing. Then like the broadcast, hear it, invite your friends, invite your not so friendly friends, and tell everyone that needs to be here that Mayegun today, Mayegun is live. And if you have done that already, thank you. So today, we are going to go the route or the route of history a little bit. Because according to the wise man, a wise man once said, those who fail to learn from history, they are bound to repeat the same mistake, yeah? And that is exactly what the history of Nigeria has always been about. Even though they removed history from your curriculum in your schools deliberately so that the criminals can be addressed or can be seen as heroes, as they normally say, our heroes past. And usually to some of us who have read the history very well, indeed, we realize that there is no real heroes in the history of that contraption, the geographical expression called Nigeria. And that is why those who are supposed to have been in jail or even dead by, their crime, dead for their crimes against that supposed country are paraded, presented as heroes. Genocidists who are supposed to have been killed for their criminal, act against the people of Nigeria. They are paraded as heroes. Our heroes past. You do not have any heroes past per se, because all you have are the criminals past, whose criminality is written in gold enough that they actually had medals for it. They call them the heroes past. I don't really buy that. Again, tonight we are going to touch on that, a bit of sprinkle of history, just to remind ourselves that some people felt like they could prevent all that you and I have now been faced with, all that you and I, right, are now possibly being subjected to as part of that contraption. If they had succeeded, maybe, just maybe, the trajectory of that contraption will be different today. But unfortunately, they did not succeed. Rather than them to clean the slate of what they saw as the potential doom for that contraption, rather than them to clean the slate, well, they ended up aggravating it. And today, Nigeria is not just being led by criminals. It has been captured by different kind of criminals. Enough that the people themselves have become so divided, so impoverished, so backward, unfortunately, without any future. Unfortunately, I mean, what other outcome can we point out today that a Nigeria, a contraption that is now being led by a former drug lord, drug dealer, a drug addict, is now their president, a terrorist sympathizer, a terrorist protector, is now their vice president. And a bunch of criminals are holding sensitive, important, institutions in that contraption. Unfortunately, the generations that are being born into that place today have their future, their present and their future mortgaged by those who are not supposed to be closer to anywhere or anything called authority. But they are in authority today, unfortunately. I'll keep using that word, unfortunately. But look at us. Yeah. 59 years ago, right? Some soldiers who were in their own belief, they were tired of the trajectory that Nigeria was headed. And those who were championing that ruinous, divisive, tribalistic trajectory, right, deserved not only to be removed from power, they deserved to also possibly be jailed, even possibly for life. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. And here we are today. Nigeria is still existing, and the worst kind of a crime against humanity has been perpetuated against the people from generation to generation, 59 years after. Brethren, on the 15th of January, 1966, 59 years ago, in what we have read in a book called Why We Struck by Ademoyega. Remember Adewale, a participant in that coup that they thought could save Nigeria from the catastrophe that this generation of ours now have to kind of like live with, not even deal with. So in 1966, according to the coup plotters, or to these soldiers, brilliant soldiers who were like real soldiers at the time, and patriotic guys who felt like the rhetoric that was being pushed by the supposed northern rulers, southern rulers, were pretty much inimical, dangerous for the future of a young country. Nigeria was just about 5.5 years old from independence at the time. So they conspired to get all these supposed First Republic criminals, Ahmadu Bello, Tafawa Balewa, what's the other one? Nnamdi Azikiwe, what's the other one from the east? The Shah felt like they were going to get all of them, possibly get them out of power. And why? Why was that? They said the people were subjected to all kinds of hardship. The supposed independence, okay? You see, Nigeria was supposed to be independence. They were supposed to be living a new life, a life that is meant to be for our people who are free. You see, people should have access to education. They should have access to, modern infrastructures and all of that, prosperity of the land and what have you. But rather, the political class were living large. They were living flamboyantly. They were living above their means. They were so corrupt that it hooked these young soldiers that they felt like they had to save this country from these rogues at the time. The number one racist in that contraption at the time, his name is Ahmadu Bello, is the descendant of the first terrorist in Nigeria, Uthman Danfodio as well. True story. This guy was preaching so much tribal, ethnic hatred that he never really hid it. Enough that there is actually a clip of him where it was, it was so racist that you would think. He said a section of the country, the Igbos, for example, like they are the worst kind of humans, okay? Because they are not controllable. They love to be independent-minded. Where in northern part of Nigeria, he himself as the premier of the northern region at the time, right? The most powerful man in northern part of Nigeria at the time. He preferred a white man or white to hold sensitive government positions than his own supposed fellow Nigerian, especially if you are Igbo or you are Yoruba, you are not wanted in northern part of Nigeria. He pronounced that, and yeah, he meant it. Anyway, the corruption at the time, according to these soldiers, was like Nigeria was supposed to be one country. They were one Nigerianist as well. They were one Nigerianist who believed that Nigeria should be one country. And therefore, they wanted to save her. To save one Nigeria, which later led to the program of the killings of the Igbos in northern part of Nigeria. Now, that didn't start in 1960s. It actually started in the mid-1940s to the 50s and to the early 60s. Kaduna Ezegu, who was born and raised in Zaria, Kaduna, was the head or the brain behind the coup. Their plan was to actually capture this supposed powerful political class and try them for corruption after they must have removed them from power. So in the morning of January 15, 1966, when they've supposedly designated all different kind of, contingents that will capture who was in charge of the Southwest. By then, Obafemi Awolowo, the then leader of the Western region, was already in jail by the plot of Tafawa Balewa and the rest who wanted to capture Yoruba land with the help of S.L. Akintola at the time. Now, S.L. Akintola happened to be the Western region premier when this coup was to take place. So, in northern part of Nigeria, Ahmadu Bello, Tafawa Balewa, who happened to be the the prime minister of Nigeria, right? It's like the leader of Nigeria, so to say. When they got to Sardauna's place, Sardauna is Ahmadu Bello. When they got to his house, he only had just one gate to his house, which means the soldiers who blockade the entrance to his house, they were asking him to surrender. And he was like, as a fighter, well, from record, from this book, he won't surrender. He would rather die. So he opened fire on them, shot and injured some of these soldiers, but eventually it was overpowered. The history said that he would rather go out dead than to surrender, to be arrested. There was never a plan of killing any of them. There was never a plan. Similarly, same thing happened in Ibadan, in Western region. When they got to S.L. Akintola's place as well, he himself was willing and ready to die than to be arrested by these mutinous coup plotters. So he also opened fire on them as well. Anyway, long story short, what the guys felt like they wanted to save from Nigeria, which is arrested the thieves of the First Republic, right? Prevent the tribal hatred, ethnic hatred that this political class were spreading at the time, right? Eventually it failed. And rather than for it to possibly reduce the hatred in that contraption, it's further cracked it up, like it skyrocketed it. Fortunately, those who stopped the coup were no other person than Aguiyi Ironsi, as well as Odimegu Ojukwu. Yeah, they stopped the coup. They did all they could. And eventually, they stopped the coup, saved the republic, or saved Nigeria. So at the end of the 2-day, the 2-day program or so, right? 22 people were dead. 11 of them were politicians, and 11 others were uniformed men, so to say, soldiers as well as policemen. Aguiyi Ironsi, who stopped the coup, arrested some of the coup plotters, ended up being the head of state, who announced the end of the regional system of government. He is never forgiven for that. The Igbos, who became the victim of the whole war, including the tribal hatred that the system finally popped up to this day, they haven't really recovered from that. So the hatred that the contraption represents lasted for another 59 years up to this day. Not even the unnecessary, genocidal war, which lasted for another 3 years from 1967 to 1970, to teach any of these bloodsuckers, warmongers or so. They couldn't teach them anything unity or anything to say we are one country, because we are never one. So 59 years after, we are still at that threshold of asking ourselves, do we really still want to be in the same country, or we actually would prefer to go our separate ways? So those Nigeria is working for, these are those who are benefiting from the contraption, the political class. If you are benefiting from from the fraud, the Nigeria is working for you. while millions, hundreds of millions of others, I'm talking about the majority, whether you are from the north or from the west or from the east, we cannot tell, right? Nigeria is not working for anyone, per se. So 59 years after, 59 years after, we are still at that, we are at that cliff, waiting for when the bell or the sound is going to probably sound, so to say. But there's been so much hatred in the system, enough that when I look at the one Nigerianist, I see ignorant people. I'm talking about people who have been fed the wrong part of their own history. Even though there's a part of the history that you are fed, which is to learn how to hate yourselves or pretend to like yourselves. But when an opportunity presents itself, we do not want to miss it. I'm talking about opportunity of us attacking and killing ourselves. It is always like, yeah, let's do it. If it is not between the Hausas and Fulanis, it will be Fulanis versus the rest of us, or the Yorubas versus the Igbos, or the Igbos versus the Ijaws. It's a place where every day people can question and ask, wait, are we actually supposed to be one country, or we're supposed to be many countries in a region called West Africa? So on this, as you are reflecting or reading different kind of history that a lot of people have presented as theirs, there is a clarity here that you should always please remember that those who planned the first coup in Nigeria, they were one Nigerianist. They were Hausas, Yorubas, Igbos, Ijaws, Ishekiris, and the rest of them who are part of that plot. And in their own efforts, they thought they could save this republic. They could save Nigeria for Nigerians. But like those who are trying to save Nigeria now, and them, they have the same thing in common. They were wrong. You cannot force what is never meant to be together, no matter how long you try, and no matter how many years you pretend that you are one. I have read a lot of the history. I have seen so many biased stories. In all of this, there's one thing I have kind of like learned from all of it. It simply means, you see, those who claimed to own or to love Nigeria, they are doing so from their own vantage position of privilege, put it that way. I'm talking about those who believe that somehow, they were the champions of what do you call it, of keeping Nigeria together. In fact, they gave themselves different kinds of award, to make themselves feel like they did a great job by keeping this contraption together and telling people to learn how to live together. You don't learn how to live together if you don't have anything in common. We do not have anything in common. This creation is never really meant to serve us. It is to serve the interest of some certain people. Some of them are dead. Some of them are still alive or dying as we speak. But when you are a young person and you can see clearly that every now and then, everybody who wants to tell you about Nigeria will be telling you that we should try and love ourselves. That tells you one thing. There is actually no real love. They will tell you that we should all come together. Let's come together for this country. One thing that tells you again is that we are never together, even if we have been pretending to be. 59 years for those who felt like they loved Nigeria, that they wanted Nigeria to be one, and they failed in that adventure. 59 years after that, millions of people have been slaughtered. Millions of lives have been destroyed. Millions of dreams have been shattered. And yet, one truth that we have all failed and we are so scared to accept is that what if we are actually not meant to be together? That's a question. Like you can sit down and be like, oh, my way to. What if we are actually not meant to be together? Why do we have to force ourselves to be together? From the word go, The idea of regional system in Nigeria is to let all of us have that independent independent existence. Do your thing, run your life, do whatever you think is good for you, without you having to be affected. Without that being affected by the actions or inactions of others, or without you having to blame other people for why you are not progressing or whether you are progressing too fast. The idea of us running our own affairs in our own different regions is enough to tell you that those who have written the history of that contraption to make it sound more like we are together, if you read it very well, you realize that there's always part of that history where they want you to believe that one region or this other region is a problem to this other region. You have seen those who have written the history on the part of the Northerners, especially the Arewa North, who have presented an idea that the Easterners are the problems. And you have seen those who have written their own part of the history, their own history from the Yoruba land, the Western region, and they presented it as if the Northerners are the problems, or the Easterners are the problems. You have seen those who have written their own history from the eastern part of Nigeria, who are pointed out and say, oh, the Northerners are the problems, or the Yorubas are the problems. So if you all want to kind of like be reasonable, that tells you one simple thing. We all find problems in one another. So why then are we forcing ourselves to stay together? Then back to those who felt like the First Republic politicians were so corrupt that something had to be done. Now, most of them are dead. I don't think there is any of them that is still left. Well, maybe some of them are still left because Obasanjo is still there. Babangida is still alive. Bokwari is still alive. And a few others like that are still alive, who are part and parcel of that Fourth Republic program and all that happened, okay? But listen, I am trying to kind of be as honest as possible. Sure, you get. If you meet the Easterners or you meet the Northerners and you read the history from the Westerners, there is always finger pointing. The Igbos are the problem. The Igbos will say, no, the Yorubas are the problem. No, the Yorubas will say, no, the Hausas, the Northerners are the problem. Meanwhile, the Northerners will say, no, the Easterners are the problem. So why then are we maintaining and keep maintaining the idea that we are one country where we can actually sit together and say, listen, let's kind of like let's part our ways this way, and we can respect ourselves, for our uniqueness. Let the Yorubas respect the Igbos in whatever they choose to do in their own country. Let the Igbos also respect the Yorubas in whatever they choose to do in their own country. Similarly, let both of us respect what the Arewas want to do in their own country. In this case, right, after 59 years of back and forth, right, Nigeria has now shown that there is no one Nigeria, but many Nigerias. Ideally, there are those who can't even like entertain the idea of these regions being their own countries, because to them there is an advantage in being big. But what is the advantage of being big in this contraption, this big for nothing, the giant of Africa that has become the burden of the world? Everywhere you go, a lot of people will tell you, a lot of these other countries will tell you how much they do not want to have anything to do with Nigeria. Sincerely, we have become a group of people that others are so suspicious of. When you go to this other part of Africa, where we're supposed to be, we're supposed to be the big brother of Africa. They all have one or two things to say about Nigeria and Nigerians, that they don't want them, or Nigerians are this or that, because rather than be a blessing, a big brother in Africa, after 64 years, going to 65 years of independence, we have rather been what? A burden, a problem. Now, that may not completely be our own making, but the system that we have sustained for these 64 years has been a system of criminality. System where criminals, the more criminally you are, the likelihood you are going to be in position of authority in that contraption. You're going to get away with a lot. Depends on the side. of the pendulum or the side of the coin that you belong to. So when we lie to ourselves that there's an advantage in us being big, but when you kind of be reasonable enough and say, what is that advantage of being big? There is none. So if they are sharing history today, because if you have read a lot about what happened in 1966, 59 years ago, that was 19 years before I was born. Yeah, that's 19 years before I was born. Now today, the consequences of that action of 1966, I, as a person, I am still sharing part of that, the consequences. You are sharing part of that.